Welcome to Grace Pilled, where we explore the infinitude of God by talking about God, within God, aka interviews with people spanning the full spectrum of the spiritual path. My name is Hanna, and I will be your guide. I've been studying and practicing in a classical Shakta tantric tradition since 2015, and I just love exploring all of the ways that God wakes up within her own dream. For the last few years, I've been working professionally as a guide, doing one-on-one work and also giving talks and courses. If you ever want to chat with me, you can book a call with me on my website or join my Patreon, which is my massive library of Q&A sessions and spiritual talks spanning everything from traditional tantric philosophy to how to spiritualize your experience of your emotions. So we cover it all. If you want to support the podcast, I now have a $5 tier that you can use as a tip jar for the show, and I would love your support. Today's guest is Reverend Cindy Pincus, minister, death doula, and someone who I very much consider a spiritual comrade. We originally met at a First Friday here in Denver. I was selling my art at a table when she walked straight up to our table and she picked up my copy of Money and the Spiritual Path, which is the zine that I sell. It's actually on my website if you're curious. And I remember seeing her and thinking to myself, this person has sparkles all around them. And I was right. She has sparkles actually all the time. In this conversation, Cindy shares the wild, beautiful, and unexpected path that led her through Christian seminary, Indigenous ceremonies, psychic training, and years of hospice and hospital chaplaincy. She speaks with very rare clarity about death, grief, ministry, and spiritual courage, and about the surprising places her deepest convictions have come from. And spoiler alert, this conviction started at a protest with a votive candle, and it ended with a mild head injury, so you'll hear that story. But there were so many things said during this conversation that actually blew my mind, so I felt very blessed to hear it all, and I hope you enjoy it too. Let's get into it. Hello. Welcome to Grace Pilled, Cindy.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here. So we are going to talk about your spiritual biography today, and you are among the special group of people that have been on this show that I know in real life. And before we actually start, I actually just wanted to share for the people that are listening the story of how we met. So I was I was selling at an art market First Friday on Santa Fe Boulevard Drive in Denver. And I remember our table was like facing the street and the sidewalk. And I actually remember I saw you walking down the sidewalk before we actually met. And you were like wearing these like big earrings. And I remember I saw you walking down the street and like you stood out to me. And I was like, oh, that person looks interesting. And then like she walked away. And then maybe like an hour later or something, all of a sudden you were like walking straight up to our table. And we just started talking. I was selling my art and I had my Money and the Spiritual Path zines on the table and you picked it up and we just started talking and you bought it. And then I was like, you should message me and tell me what you think of it. And then you did. And then basically from there, we've just known each other. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, pretty much. And I was on a particular mission that day. I was advertising my own business, my own services more or less, and was just like on a fear-facing mission where I was like, I don't care what comes of this. I need to put myself like in the path and the stream of life. And so anyone who even remotely looks like interesting or like they have something to offer, I'm just going to introduce myself to, because I just like you never know. And I was like, Spirit, direct me. And you had a very interesting table. And then people who talk about spirituality and money, I'm always interested in because it is loaded. And I was like, let's see what you have to say.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Yeah, I could feel like you had some sort of energy. It was like there was all these people walking around on First Friday, but then it was like there was like it's like in Mario Kart when like you get the mushroom and then you have all the sparkles around you. Like you very lightly had that. And I remember that was the first thing I noticed about you. But yeah. So let's do your spiritual biography. But before we get there, what's like a recent win in your life? A little thing that you're proud of or a big thing you're proud of just to get started.
I will say I did just quit a job and it was incredibly difficult. And I'll say I'm proud of it because I've been in this kind of job before where things just slowly get worse and worse people are put in positions of power. And I've just kind of stuck with it before. I mean, like years beyond what is reasonable. And then when I get out, I just have like years worth of trauma to undo. So this job started getting bad back in March, and I have been fighting since March, and then was like, oh, you leave. That's what you do. And you know what I'm proud of is there's people at this position. I worked as a minister in a nursing home who I love. It was easily the very best ministry I've ever done in my life. I learned so much about my own theology, and just having the courage to say, I love you. You always have my love with you, and I'm going to leave. Um, has been like spiritually transformative for me. And hopefully, I think some other folks have decided to leave because of my departure too. So they were empowered, you might say. And I'm like, you're employable. You are a holy child of God. Get out of here. So,
So the win is like really just leaving
yeah.
and feeling confident about that and not
Yeah.
tolerating the conditions of the job.
Yeah. And doing it with both grief and love. Because I think when I've left before, it's just been pure resentment, pure hatred and grudges, and being like, I love these people in this place, and I have grief on my leaving, and I'm still going to do it.
Oh yeah, like leaving behind the people you gotten to know in the community,
Yeah.
not just your coworkers.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
has
The
that been
residents.
difficult?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're no fault of their own. They're losing a minister.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Totally. Oh. Yeah, but does it feel any kind of way that people left after you left?
Oh, like the most validating, vindicating, satisfying. I was like, see?
That's so funny. Yeah, when
Yeah.
I was like 21 or 22, I got fired from a landscaping company. This was before I started my own business. And it was very unfair that I got fired. And then after I left, three other people left in protest. And that was pretty satisfying.
Oh, that's even.
So I've been there. I've been like, see, this is ridiculous. So, wow. Okay. So big wins leaving your job. And now you're on to greener pastures. Like, what's
Much greener. Much greener. So beautiful. And I had to pass through what I might call a fear portal. Is there going to be anything on the other side to catch me? I run my own business. I offer services myself, all kinds of workshops and teachings and counseling. And the fear of, am I going to be able to support myself? But then there were so many other opportunities that came up to continue doing good ministry. And my partner actually reminded me, he said, there's folks out there who need your love and care and ministry, and Spirit's going to put you in the right place to offer that. So I'm headed that way. Got the job offers in hand, finishing this one Thursday, next one on Monday. Seamless.
Oh my God. That's so cool. In this economy,
I know.
what a miracle.
What?
That's so cool. Well, I love to hear all of that. And let's get into like, okay, so you're saying already like they lost a minister. This is the sort of where I work with people one-on-one teaching and all these sorts of things. But aside from like what you physically do in a spiritual sense, like how would you describe your spiritual path, your spiritual practice?
Yeah. It's taken me years to be able to say this comfortably, but I follow the Christian path, and that used to be so uncool to me. But the more I've learned about those ancient wisdom teachings, like I would say mystical Christianity, metaphysical Christianity, which I've learned is not actually a far cry from, the Bible, the gospel, the canon. I used to think it was totally different, like weird witchy stuff. And now I'm like, oh, Christ was a witch, total shaman, total psychic, right there with all the enlightened masters. So I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'm a Christian. It's so good. So
Okay, so you are affirming right now, I am a Christian. That's how you would describe yourself?
yeah, I would. And I'll tell you, it's funny, even being a Christian minister, it's taken me many years to get to the point of saying that. I'm ordained by a denomination that has a lot of exiles, ex-evangelicals, and refugees from Christianity and Catholicism, the Unitarian Universalist. denomination. And so it's dangerous talking about Christianity and Jesus in those churches. I've been attacked for it, you know? And so finally I'm like, I don't care. You know, I need Jesus. You probably need him too, but I won't put that on you. But I will at least say, me, Christ, Mary Magdalene.
Oh, wait, okay, so you're ordained by the Unitarian Universalist Church?
Mhm.
But and I've actually gone to a few services at UU churches in the past several years, but you're saying that like it's a little bit not the norm to be super Christian or about Jesus when you're at in a UU setting?
You know, that's what I've found. It's a faith that has a lot of openness for all different kinds of paths, except Christianity. And I don't necessarily fault them for that. I really think it's a product of the culture that we're in. People who are looking for a church community that doesn't have the kind of Christianity, the modern American Christianity that I think a lot of folks feel subject to. So I don't fault them for that, but I do believe they're missing out on some good stuff.
I see. Right. And like maybe it makes sense that Christianity is at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, because there's a lot of people that have been negatively affected by that. Like you're saying, there's like refugees from like Catholicism and otherwise, like, so it makes sense.
100%.
But you felt maybe like an outsider?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think the most negative feedback I've ever gotten in UU churches is when I mentioned Jesus. And there was one church long ago where I didn't even talk about everything that I believe about Christ and Christianity. I just compared him as a like social activist to, let's say, Martin Luther King or Mother Teresa. But all the people heard was, you know, I can say now their wound was speaking. The harm they'd suffered at the hands of some other Christians or priests or ministers was the only thing that was activated. And they were so angry with me for trying to convert them to Christianity. And I was like, I am not. Uh, but I really do, you know, I'll say,
Understandable.
yeah, you know, in the years I've spent since that time long ago, just understanding the true harm that religious wounds can do. It goes to the core, the very core, if someone receives some kind of spiritual or religious wound. And so I have a lot more humility in the face of that. I hope, you know.
Totally. Well, I actually really want you to explain what your meaning of Jesus is in the context when you speak of him at some point in this conversation. But I know that like, is Christianity the only thing you engage in, or are there like other things that inspire your practice?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say there's two other strong traditions that I really rely on. The first one is generally North American shamanic traditions, in particular, work with Lakota folks and the Native American church ceremonies. I've just found them to be such powerful, ancient, and like truth telling ceremonies. The number of times I've gotten my, are we cursing on this
We
recording?
go off.
The number of times I've gotten my shit handed to me by, you know, Lakota elder, Indigenous elder, Cheyenne elder, in like the gentlest way that it took me 3 days to figure out what exactly it was that they were saying about my misstep. My error has just been like, and in the way that I've just been delighted by how I was totally seen and called out and like continue to go back to those spiritual traditions just because of the enormous truth that they carry and the enormous history of the indigenous folks of this country who are the ultimate perceivers of truth, and primarily I believe because of the way they've been treated by colonizers such as my ancestors, that I'm like, I need that truth. So that's a big one. And also to just be an other in a space. I try and put myself as the other, and it's so uncomfortable. Um, like,
There's growth in that discomfort, or
oh,
like, yeah.
100%. And then the other tradition, this one has taken me a while to claim as well, because I had huge judgment about it, is the psychic and clairvoyant tradition. Um, but that has ended up being one of the most practical theologies that I've ever encountered. One of the most practical, useful encounters with spirit and spirituality that I've ever been trained in. And it's also changed my entire life. And I've discovered that a lot of the big spiritual teachers I follow, the two in my mind right now, Christ and Paramhansa Yogananda, were psychic, totally psychic. They're advanced, consciousness allowed them to be psychic people. And when I read the stories in the scripture and in Autobiography of Yogi, I'm like, oh, they're just psychics. So all of that is like woven together.
Would you have not said it in that way until you had the experience of the psychic training?
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
Okay, so we've got Christianity, the Lakota traditions, and the elders that you've sat with and ceremonies there, and then clairvoyant training. And so these are like three major influences on your practice and your worldview and how you engage with people.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, I already had so many questions, but I actually really want to get into kind of like, how did you get here? You know?
Yeah.
How did you get here? Like, how did you end up training as a psychic? And so, where do you think your spiritual path began? Early in life, 20s, atheist wake up? Like, what happened?
I'm still having those. Okay, so looking back, it was always there. It didn't quite make sense to me until I discovered that seminary theological education was something that a modern American queer woman could have access to. So my family is culturally Jewish. And so we just had Passover, Hanukkah, went to temple once, maybe after September 11th, because my folks were like, we don't know how to address what happened. Let's go to the Jewish temple. And you're like, oh, okay. And then like never went back. And, grew up in the Church of the Great Outdoors, God, as we called it. But then I was living at my parents' house after college and went for a run around the park and came back and sat on their couch. And it was like 2 PM and I was doing nothing with my life, which was great. I don't guilt myself for that at all. And I turned on the TV, Law and Order episode was on, and the murder victim was a woman attending a New York seminary. And I was like, what? Really? And I don't remember the rest of the episode. Who killed her? Probably some, priest down the hall. But I went home that night and just Googled like liberal seminary, which it just had never crossed my mind before. And pages came back. And I remember weeping because it was looking back, it was like, I know that it was, oh, that's the path. There it is. And everything that's come after. But at the moment, I just felt overwhelmed with emotion, started reading the catalogs and went off to seminary. And I went originally I applied to a seminary that's Unitarian Universalist, pagan, earth-based, witchy. I was like, hell yeah, that's what I'm doing. And they happened to be in a consortium with 7 other seminaries out in Berkeley: Franciscans, Jesuits, Baptists, Buddhist, Dominicans, who are so intense, I've discovered, non-denominational Christian, everybody. But I was like, oh, that's nice, but I'm going to the pagan seminary. Well, I went. And then I went to the seminary across the street just for a tour because they had a free lunch or something like that.
There was seminary on every block. What was this? Berkeley, California?
It's on this place called Holy Hill, and they called it because there's 7 seminaries sitting on top of this beautiful hill, and people just up there studying theology, and it's incredible. It's like 3 blocks north of UC Berkeley, so in a really interesting historical location as well. And I went over to the other seminary because of the free lunch and then discovered that tuition was like $20,000 less. And I was like, well, if you can cross-register, I'll just go over here and save my money. But it turns out that that was the right place for me. And I ended up getting a Christian education there with folks who were like, Christ was a justice warrior, an activist, an enlightened master. Like Christ is where it's at. Meeting people who had grown up in churches that I just had no concept of what they were talking about. Like I remember in our first year, we had a Bible class, which I would like was a big fat eye roll for me. But they're like, you have to learn the Gospels
Like,
if you want to.
design in art school. It's like, oh, do I have to do this?
And I was like, fine, I'll learn about the New Testament. But it just ended up being so beautiful. And I just love this. There were people in there. Everyone was learning from different perspectives. And there was a person in there. Okay, you may not know this if you're listening, but there's 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They each tell the same story from 4 different perspectives, but someone who had grown up in the church thought it was one continuous story, and in that class discovered that it was not one continuous story. It was 4 different accounts of the same story, and so she wrote her final paper and titled, her presentation, and titled it, "You Can't Keep a Good Man Down," because she thought Christ had been resurrected 4 times. So, like, everyone was learning, and I was just amazed.
Can we pause for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. I just want to make sure I'm understanding your story. So you grew up culturally Jewish, but it sounds like it was, the way people grew up culturally Christian. Like you go for the high holidays, and that's about it, or something.
Exactly.
And then, you have this huge response to seeing the woman who got murdered who went to the seminary in New York. Okay. And then you end up in Berkeley, and this is where I got a little bit lost. You ended up There was the pagan seminary, and then there was one across the street. You ended up at the one across the street.
Because it was cheaper.
And okay, and it was the right choice in hindsight.
Yes.
But then you were the girl who grew up Jewish, and then you end up in the Christian seminary. Was that like, did you ever go through anything like, or did it not really seem like a big deal, or I'm just wondering.
It might be one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to say I'm a Christian, because I feel like I'm betraying my, lovely father, who's only been anything but, he's always been supportive of me through all my strange phases of life. And it took him a number of years to be like, oh, religion is not a phase for you. And I'm like, yeah, it's like really good, and it's changing my life, and it's really powerful. Um, and thank you for your understanding.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, just like, were your parents confused about what you were doing, and then that helped contributed to you not really owning what you were doing? I'm just wondering.
I think so. I think the farthest they could go for a long time was, well, you seem happy, and that's what we want for our child. And we don't really understand what you're doing. And it's interesting. They'll come when I preach in churches. They'll come and listen and be there, I think, in support of their eldest and most favorite child. Um, my God, they'll never listen to this. Um, and I think they see that people are impacted by the sermons and the work I do, and that my life has become good. And truly, that's what they want. I think that's all any parent really wants for their child, is to see them thrive and happy and surrounded by good relationships. And every so often they'll ask me a theology joke, a theology something, and then it'll become a joke, which I'm like, I love that. I'll always joke about the Bible, but I'm like, yeah, that's as far as they might go for now.
Oh, I see. I see. I
Yeah.
see. Like they'll take interest in what you're doing, and then it kind of turns into a joke, but not in like a mean way, just kind
Not
of
in a mean way,
as far as we're going.
basically.
I get you. Wow. Okay, so now that I fully understand the story, you were saying the girl who thought that Jesus was reborn several times.
Yeah.
What else was happening in seminary for you? Like, you were kind of annoyed about needing to take those early courses, but like, did you start having experiences or personal experiences with
Yeah.
material? Like, what was going on?
You know what was really beautiful? There were 2 groups of people who really introduced me to an astounding Christianity, helped me understand that there's actually Christianities, that there's not just one, and that there have been so many over the course of history. So taking courses with the Jesuits was really important for me, because the Jesuits are devout Catholics. They're committed. These are people who are giving their life to Catholicism. They're becoming monastics. They're becoming brothers and sisters, monks and nuns, and who also have a really particular Catholic tradition of open-mindedness, learning, and teaching. And so I started taking classes with them because they had their solid beliefs, but were always willing to engage with an open mind. So I ended up learning a lot from them. I took a class from them called Mariology, just the study of Mary. There's a whole theology called the study of Mariology. Mariology. And so I just ended up asking them so many questions about Mary, the Virgin Mary. Yeah, look it up. who she was, what's her theology. She's an enormous presence in the Catholic Church in a way that she's not really in modern American Christianities. And we had a really deep debate about Mary's virginhood, because that's not in the original scripture. That was a pope later decided that Mary was a virgin, as in didn't have sex. So we got into that, looked at the original scripture, challenged each other, and it was just like, how beautiful that you can really dig into the historical concepts of these. I have a whole different version of Mary now. But then the other people who really influenced me were the Franciscans, who are from St. Francis and St. Clare, and just have their belief more or less is that God's love for us is evident in creation itself, trees, flowers, nature. And so they're just in love with the earth, and it's hard to kind of put this into words, but impoverishing ourselves in service to the earth. And so to encounter that kind of Christianity, Catholicism was transformative, you know?
So were there people of certain sects lecturing? Like, who were you, or were you just reading this in books? Like, were you meeting people that were actually living the material?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I mentioned the Dominicans. Those are folks who are devoted to St. Thomas Aquinas, and they made me crazy because St. Thomas Aquinas is so strict and rigid and systematic, and there's no flexibility, but they devoted their lives to it. They're walking around with their true monks, living in a monastery, getting their seminary degree. So there's no way to not be impacted by folks living that faithfully, even if I'm they won't shut up about Thomas Aquinas. Shut up. He was just a man who was obsessed with rules. So very important.
So Mariology and the Franciscans really lit something up inside of you.
Yeah.
Inspiration, but were you having experiences? What was your personal experience? Were you experiences with Christ? What was happening on an experience level?
Here's a very interesting experience. I would call this, even to this day, a conversion experience. So I was in seminary. My last year was 2015. And there were a ton of protests going on at that point in time because a bunch of cops had just been acquitted for the murder of Black folks. If you remember back to the summer of 2015. Okay, maybe we have more than one ghost in the house.
I just saw the door close.
That's okay. I know how to take care of them. And so I was at this protest. I went down with all the faithful of Holy Hill, people who were ordained priests, wearing the priest collar, people in their robes, monks, nuns, sisters, and the police in Berkeley and Oakland were there at the protest. And it was right at the location that all of the protests happened in the 60s, just south of the UC Berkeley campus. And I had a naive idea that if the folks in religious garb stood at the front of the line between the protesters and the police, that the police would have some respect for that.
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea. And they sure did it. And so, we were up there, and I had my sign, my sincere sign that said, the Jesus can't breathe. I think it was Eric Garner, whose murderer just got acquitted. And Jesus wept, and the scripture will convince them, in this hand. And in this hand, I had a votive candle, one of those tall ones, that had the image of Christ with the heart on it, with the 3 tricolor rays coming out, that was lit. We were holding our candles, vigil, all this kind of stuff. And the police were alert to disperse, alert to disperse. And we didn't disperse. And then they attacked, and it was total chaos. I feel emotional talking about it right now because it was my conversion to the truth of the brutality of the American regime. And I had this candle with me, tear gas everywhere. I was hit on the back of my head. Saw stars, went down, was trampled, pulled up, just chaos everywhere, and was bleeding, and there was blood everywhere, and I just didn't know what was going on. A friend grabbed me and pulled me out. We went to the meeting spot. If anything goes wrong, 3 blocks that way. And everyone is like, oh my God, are you okay? And we have to go to the emergency room and that kind of stuff. And I looked down and that candle was still lit. And I have no idea how. And there was something about,
all of the stuff that was going on very easily.
you know, I can't believe
I could have put it out.
I don't know how it was still lit. I have no idea. But there was something about like, you know, the time that Christ and Mary were living in was rough. It was bad. It was worse than what our country is living in now. The Roman Empire was brutal with no accountability. Um, and yet they said, you know, if you follow these ways, you will have life. And so it was like the last semester of the last month of seminary, and I had this experience, and this candle was lit, and I was just like, what's going on, you know? And I really started looking at Christ at that moment in time. It seems small in comparison. There's all kinds of ways to explain the lit candle, but it was the conversion moment for me, you know, of like, look deeper, there's something here. You want to see the brutality of an empire up close and survive, bring Christ with you, you know, this being knows what that is like. So in short, that was a big experience for me.
Big experience.
Yeah.
Big experience. Wow. Did that what was happening in the aftermath of that? Did it like inspire you to study deeper or show up for things in a new way? Like what happened afterwards?
Well, I'll say what definitely occurred was I would say the first conversion experience of like, oh, this is a brutal empire. This is horrifying. And I need to get unnaive about that. And I need to figure out where I stand in the midst of that. And I will say, you know, that was 10 years ago now. Things have changed dramatically in the past 10 years. But within myself, what I found is that I can continue to face what's happening in this country with, I mean, true joy, true courage, true power, true like delight and excitement in the face of some really grim shit, because of a deepening root in the Christian wisdom and in the scriptures and in the teachings of this Christ being and the people who have followed him through the millennia, and being like, this is the root that sustains me. And just realizing like, to be in the world at this point in time, at any point, but especially this point, I gotta have a root. And that's really what I encourage people, like, tend to your root first and the rest will reveal itself, what you're meant to do, what your path is.
So in a lot of ways, this experience that you had in 2015 was the first conversion, but it also called you to root yourself, and you have felt the fruit of rooting yourself deep over the last 10 years.
Exactly.
It makes you feel even more convicted when you suggest it to other people. Like, you know, this is really important. This is like, I completely agree with you. I don't know how you raw dog the United States government right now. With a world that can help you digest what's going on. Like, I don't know how people do it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I totally gotta, wow. And so how long was the seminary program?
It's robust. It's 3 full-time years. Yeah.
And so you went to college and then you took a break and then seminary.
Yep. And then there's a number of other requirements on the way to ordination. Internships in hospitals, being a hospital chaplain, which was like, whoa. It was so powerful. I ended up in a hospital unit in a teaching hospital in San Francisco. So, and on the cardiovascular floor. So people with all kinds of heart problems coming off the streets of San Francisco. Meth, old age, addiction, just freaking heart giving out. And, you know, I just learned to kind of humble myself before the paths that human beings can take through this earth. And I remember I had a moment in there. So someone was back in the hospital who had been in, I was only there 3 months. He'd already been in like 4 times, with like just terrible heart illness. His heart was giving out on him and he didn't care. And he'd come into the hospital and he would order lunch. And anyone who's been in the hospital know that hospital food makes you sicker than when you went in. There's nothing healing about hospital food. Okay, let me just say that's from my perspective. But this guy would always I'm like, don't do that if you want to leave the hospital. But some people don't have a choice, Would come in and order his Shasta Cola and 2 hot dogs. And I was incensed and was like, this hospital is horrible. This man is killing himself. And it just like raging to my supervisor, who was like, yeah, well, you're the chaplain. So what are you going to do here? And I'm like, well, what do I do here? And he's like, you just walk with people where they are. And I'm like, but they're killing him. And he's like, mm-hmm. And I'm like, and he's killing himself. And he's like, mm-hmm. Yeah. So just interesting stuff like that, just to, like continue to wake me up to the truth of the world and the many paths that we take through it. And, at this point in time, I'm deep in some karma teachings and what karma actually is and the necessity of having every kind of karma possible on the soul's journey, that it's all required. And, I would say I'm jumping ahead, but my chaplaincy since then has changed to tell me what are the strategies you're using now to survive this insane world. And I'm just going to tell you, you're doing great. That's kind of philosophy at this point in time. Helping people along and just really trusting and asking spirit, like, show me this person's karma so I can learn. Maybe, I know I'll have to go through it at a certain point myself, but maybe I can learn to go through it with a little grace. At least, eat my 2 hot dogs and my Shasta Cola while my heart's exploding with a little bit of grace.
Or fearlessly.
Fearlessly. Yeah. And it helped me, and that man helped me enjoy the neighborhood cookout where previously I was like, that hot dog has nitrates. And now I'm like, it's got mustard on. Hand me that hot dog. I'm here to.
The community of eating with all the people is healing, even though there's nitrates in the hot dog.
Me. Yeah. Loneliness would kill me faster than the hot dog would. Hand me that hot dog. I'll eat it.
Well, it sounds like, regardless of the health impacts of the hot dog, when you were working in the learning hospital or the teaching hospital, it sounds like that was a good experience. You being presented with all of your own beliefs about, like, how things should be, and then being gently guided by somebody who knew things to be like, yeah, you just have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that sounds like such a necessary experience. Like,
so helpful. So good. Just eased my life. And there were also beautiful, miraculous things that I witnessed. There was one room, 431, that people would always come into. Anyone who's ever worked in a regular floor in a hospital will tell you there are rooms there that are cursed and rooms that are blessed. And I just loved whoever showed up in the blessed room. I learned over the course of the summer to go and pay attention to that person. And it was always someone who was at an end stage, something, did not have any time left to live, and who had arrived at a place of joy, gratitude, love, awe. And so I feel like I got the chance to sit at the feet of some true spiritual masters. And why does that, Darshan?
Darshan is like you are viewing like a great being, and the being of viewing you. Yeah. Darshan of this great being.
Yeah. And they would just go sit, and they were always like tiny, emaciated older women who just had like the joy of God shining out of their face, and would just say the most extraordinary spiritual truths, and then be like, can you call the nurse? I need more morphine. And I'm like, yeah. Like, do you mind if I just like hang out in here? And I'd always walk out and things would look a little different, I'd be like, so
what was in the cursed room?
Fear, a lot of fear, honestly. People whose surgeries hadn't gone well, and who had to face the profound fear of losing their life before they were reconciled with it. And a lot of them did lose their lives in really rough ways, in a lot of things. And so being a chaplain was really powerful in that room too, to be like, this is how it ends as well. And whether you're in fear or joy, it's going to end, And there's nothing wrong with the fact that they didn't reconcile their lives either. You need that experience. What is it like to die unreconciled and in fear? There's value there too.
Wow. Were you, okay, so I'm hearing you speak a lot about like death experiences, watching people die. Like, was that ever on your bingo card? Like, did you ever think, like, did you think that that's like something that you were going to be so close to.
No, and it's interesting because you're moving the plot along just like so perfectly. So after this hospital chaplaincy, I desperately wanted to do more hospital work. The only companies I could find that were applying were hospice companies. And so I took it as like a second option and ended up doing hospice work for 5 or 6 years and seeing a lot of people die and a lot of people end their lives and seeing some incredible stuff and seeing some horrifying stuff that like I remember this one woman had terrible dementia, almost couldn't speak. And I just thought she was so cool. She had the most beautiful things in her room. And I would always go and be like, "Can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about this?" And when she finally got her words together, she would always say, "Please leave." And I'm like, and I always tried to get in my chaplaincy before she would kick me out of her room. And then I happened to be on call the weekend that she died. So the nurse goes, pronounces the person who's dead, and then they call the chaplain, and I wait with the body until the mortuary comes and picks them up. And I was like, "Oh, she's died. I'm going to get to go spend time with her, and just really bless her and do my thing. And I went into her room and just spent some time, like, finally looking around at all her cool stuff. And then my practice is I always say a prayer for the person's spirit to pass easily onto the other side. A couple different traditions I've encountered say that it takes some time for the spirit to fully exit the body, make their way to the other side. And so I said my prayer and I put my hand out and just gently rested it on her lower shin. And I felt an electric shock. She, with the last of her soul energy, pushed me away and was like, "Please." And I was just like, "I'm sorry. Okay. I have intruded," and went and wait outside. So like stuff like that would happen. But then, on the other hand, there were people who were very, very afraid to die, who knew they were going to face demons. And I used to scoff at that, but I don't anymore. I know there are rough things waiting for some folks on the other side, not because they're bad or deserve punishment, but it's just their state of consciousness, and there's a lot more that can be said about that.
Like
But
they're sowing seeds of possibilities. It's not punishment. It's just kind of.
they're headed into a fear realm. They're headed into a greed realm. Nothing changes when you die. It's just you don't have a body. And I remember someone who was very afraid to die. And again, I kind of naively reassured him that everything would be fine, which I do ultimately believe. But he died and he just started turning green and looking horrible. And the fear, I could see the fear accumulating even in his body that he had just departed. So, I said a big prayer for him and asked some help to come and help this man, help this soul along. But what I learned from that was, again, nothing changes when I die. I'll be in the same state of consciousness as when I'm in this body. And so it's worth it to do the work now.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I was like, what were you taking from witnessing all of this? Like, and you're saying, I'm realizing that my consciousness doesn't change when I die, but like, how are you being impacted by all of these experiences?
Yeah. Well, I'll say what I saw is people die how they lived. So if folks were stubborn, they had a stubborn death. If folks had a great sense of humor, something funny would happen around their death, you know? Like the body would fart after the person had died. There was, "Are you allowed to laugh?"
That's gonna be me.
And I'd be like, "That's funny. I'm gonna laugh." And then, people could lighten up. I just met a woman. My husband is a hospice chaplain, so I'm sorry, a hospice nurse, so he's still around a lot of death. And there was a woman who just loved meeting people. I met her. He was like, "Just come meet this woman." I met her 2 days before she died, and she shook my hand and just held on and just said, "It's such a pleasure to meet you. Tell me about yourself." 48 hours before she died, she still wanted to learn something about someone new. And I'm touched by that. So she left behind a legacy of a person who just feels like, "You want to know me?" And I'm like, what a gift to leave behind. So,
Like maybe somebody else would be completely self-centered.
mhm.
They're
Oh,
looking
I've seen that.
curious about other people at all, and she was
Yeah.
curious about you.
Yeah. And like, what a gift that was to leave behind when I'm like, you could be focusing on your dying and your family, and I would never be offended, but you wanted to know me, a stranger, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think you already know this, and then maybe some of the listeners know this, but my mom has alcoholic dementia. And something that I really took from that experience being with her hands-on for so many years is that dementia just amplifies the existing nature of
Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah.
And I really took from that experience, it's like I don't have any say in whether or not I get dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, like, things happen. And I really felt like, if I'm going, how do I want to deal with the groundlessness of losing my mind potentially?
Yeah.
What would be the most favorable mind state for me to cultivate throughout my life so that when I experience like complete loss of mental control, potentially, I'm not going to be a person who's like, my mom definitely responded to it of like fear, control, uh pushing people away from her, like all these, like it's basically like, I'm sure you have insights on this, I'd love to hear it, but it's like that loss of mental control. Either you kind of flow with it and you're kind of like one of those happy dementia people that are like, oh, it's so funny that I can't remember anything, or you're the people who are like gripping onto the steering wheel for dear fucking life and pushing everybody away. Like it's like I think there is something to like, how do you handle groundlessness throughout your life for when those moments maybe arrive. So anywho, that was just what was coming up for me. Do you have any thoughts
Wow.
about that?
Dementia's such an interesting one. Anyone who's ever lived with a loved one with dementia will just tell you about like the baffling and heartbreaking and powerful nature of it. And just getting to see like a dysfunctional physical brain writ large in a human body, and I've seen it's so individual and unique for each soul. One of the things I always try and do with people for dementia is to remember that it's just the physical brain that's not functioning. The soul is intact, always whole, always conscious, always present. And I've had some really astounding experiences working with folks with dementia where my practice is just to look them in the eye and insist on seeing the spark of the soul. And until I see it, just say, hello, hi there, nice to see you. And then when I see it, I'm like, hey, good to see you. And the responses I get, sometimes people are like, oh, still off in dementia land. But every so often that spirit is strong enough to just like send a burst of energy through the brain and say hello. It's
Like a moment of lucidity.
exactly.
100%.
Yeah. Or just that pure spiritual recognition. But then, with dementia, um, I've seen some people go into dementia because they're just like sick of being in charge. Some people go in because they need a little rest before the next life of not taking care of business. Some people go in because, they physically put themselves in that situation. If you've taken like drugs or alcohol over a long period of time, it just impacts the tissues in that way.
No, 100%. Yeah, like it's purely physiological damage.
Yeah. And that's part of it. But like, I wrap that into a whole soul's path. A soul's decision to impact their body in that particular way to have that experience. Um,
I wonder if you have seen this, but sometimes with my mom, I felt like she had extreme childhood trauma. And sometimes I wonder if she just went her whole life waiting for somebody to take care of her. And so then it's like she just started to lose her mind pretty young
yeah,
so that someone would be forced into taking care of her. And now she is in memory care and she is taken care of
yeah,
for all intents and purposes. Not
yeah,
the ideal situation.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like metaphorically, I've thought that about her.
yeah. I think there's something to that. There's also people who I see this a lot in older women with dementia who I kind of have an inkling that they're just sick of the societal rules that they've been forced to live with based on their, circumstances of birth their whole life. And they'll just eat food with their fingers. They'll say like, fuck you, get away from me. I hate you. I'm going to murder you, or they'll just like poop in their pants and not care. Will be like, do you want us to change their clothes? You're like, nope, don't care. And there's just like a freedom that I've seen in some older women with dementia that I'm like, are you enjoying your freedom from the social restrictions right now? They like sleep when they want, get up when they want, pee in the corner, kick over a plant, break things. And it's disruptive. It's distracting. People trying to medicate it. They like it distresses family members to no end. But I have like a secret joy when I see, especially the older women doing that. I'm like, do you want to go sit in the other corner? I'll help you. Like, come on, get free. And
Oh, what a view.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Gotta just kind of bow down before it, touch the feet, touch the master there.
Totally. Well, so you've been on this timeline for a long time of chaplaincy in hospitals and hospice centers. Has that basically been the case since you were at that teaching school?
Yes, primarily. And I took like a nice fat break during COVID to do clairvoyant work. I got a lot of that nice COVID money coming in.
Nice. Hell yeah. Stimmy. Remember the stimmies? We need more stimmies. Why did that stop?
I'm just laughing now to like how little attention I paid to a check I received signed by Donald Trump. And I was like, yeah, nice. And now looking back, I'm like, money of the devil. But it's spent. It's gone now. It's gone.
You used Donald Trump money to get trained as a psychic. That's amazing.
There you go. Sure did.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and begin to teach myself, myself, teach others about the kind of work that I've encountered and a lot of death work and spirituality work and be like, here's what I've seen, here's what I know. I think we're at a time on the planet when folks just need this kind of information. How do you deal with the spirit? How do you deal with death and dying? Like, please send us more death doulas. Let's usher off. I'm like, this is almost a little taboo to say, but I really appreciate COVID. I view it as a spirit, an active spirit who came to do a big cleanup job on this planet. I think she's still active, and I use the shit out of that spirit. I'm in a couple of traditions that consider like natural elements as allies, and so I was like making offerings to the ally, the spirit of COVID, to do this cleanup job, an enormous death portal that just settled over this planet. And I was like, get this stuff off, like some lives, a ton of lives were taken. But I was like, hey, take this too. Take this broken system, get this off the planet. And I think a lot of folks are tapped into that at this point in time. How do we break down this system and send it to the junkyard?
Oh, yeah, there's death happening on multiple levels. The system is collapsing.
And the spirit of death, too. What a beautiful ally, Santa Muerte.
Yeah, okay, wait, so I have a question for you. So this is so random, but what do you okay. I am of the thinking, just from how I observe, specifically, let's just talk about American culture, like this absolute phobia and resistance to death. Not thinking about it, staving it off as much as possible, not knowing how to deal with that imminent loss, any of these sorts of things on a cultural level, like in a meaningful way. How do you think that, like, and you're saying, like, we need more death doulas, more of these people that are going to help people to understand the transition. What do you think, like, the impact is on American culture when we're so afraid of looking at death in the face?
Well, primarily, I think we miss a lot of good stuff, miss some opportunities. I think it costs a lot of money. Um, I think the cost is just extremely high financially for sure. I've heard some um factor, fact somewhere that was like 71% of medical costs go towards the last like 21 days of a person's life, like measures, or it's like go towards life prolonging measures for folks that only prolong their life another 21 days or something like that. And I just think of the immense effort that is put in by people creating those costs, not just the medical industry, but families, individuals seeking treatment and all that kind of thing. And the opportunities that are missed in those last 21 days of life. Of like I always say in the last time of life, the stakes are incredibly high and incredibly low. Miracles can happen, healing can happen, enormous soul growth can happen, enormous interpersonal and familial growth can happen. Opportunities that don't come any other time in life happen when someone is dying, just before they actively die, and then when they're in the active dying process. Like true inbreaking of God, like revelation of spirit, Christ consciousness is all right there for people to gather. And so, I really rely on talking about roots, the spirit of Mary Magdalene for this. In scriptures, she's the one who doesn't look away from the hard thing. She is there in every gruesome, gory, difficult moment that Christ experiences. She's the one who's looking and witnessing. And my understanding spiritually is, she's the one who went to the tomb. She was the first one who saw the empty tomb. And we kind of look at it from this side that, oh, you got to see the miracle, the risen Christ in the garden. You got to see the first one to see him resurrected in his astral light body, fully formed without the need of the material realm. How beautiful. But she wasn't going to see that. She was going to collect the rotting body and like properly bury it or, offer some kind of thing. She was going to see the worst part. And her willingness to see that, I believe, was part of the miracle of resurrection and transformation. Someone who's willing to witness it. And so that's kind of what I mean when I'm like, we need those death doulas and people willing to not look away from the disgusting, horrible, terrible, gruesome thing that's happening. Because when you look, you see the miracle. That's the only place the miracle happens, in the midst of the gore. And that's set up by design, can you have the whole spectrum? Well, if you can, you'll find it right there in the crucifixion and the rotting body.
Are you seeing it like by the very nature of the dying process and everything that brings up, it creates this like potent area for transformation? And then the death doulas are the ones that help not just the person who's dying look, but maybe the people closest to just like stay in that.
Yeah. To have that moment of like, look, this isn't all there is, and if you watch carefully, you'll see like the enormous eternal reality of God right here, this moment.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, something that's coming up for me is thinking I've read a lot of biographies of Indian gurus and saints, and maybe you've also heard this as well, but it's like usually like when a major spiritual figure or guru in the yoga traditions dies, like people like leading up until the guru's death are like pounded with grace. Mm-hmm. It's like right as they're like the person is dying, it's like it's almost like the body becomes even more permeable and less relevant. Like the body becomes less relevant. And then all of that grace that's already flowing through them is just like pounding. Like people, like the disciples have like the craziest experiences at the end of the guru's life.
Yeah.
And so like I that, I'm not saying that like everyone who's dying is going to pound everybody with grace, but it kind of, there's something to that. Yeah. Maybe is relevant. Does that make sense to you?
100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard how Yogananda, his great samadhi, this was a couple of years before he died?
Oh, wait, tell me about
it. Okay, I've been obsessed with this guy for a while. I think I've been in his tradition in a couple past lives, because immediately it was like, oh, hey, you again. So he was already enlightened. He was born enlightened. 4 years before he died, he was in this house, I think out in Southern California in the desert. And there were a bunch of disciples in the house too. Everyone was going about their business in the evening in the different parts of this enormous house. And all of a sudden, all of them, each and every one of them heard his voice in their head saying, come to me, come to me. They're like, what? And they got up and they all went at the same time through the house to where Yogananda was. And they were like going along and they saw each other in the hallway and they're like, did you just hear Yogananda's voice in your head? And they're like, yeah, did you? And so they went, and as they approached the room he was in, the disciples who were there, who were still living, were like, it was like stepping into God, not the presence of God, but into God. They were like, I'm inside of God. And they went, and Yogananda was in what they referred to as a great samadhi, where he was both Divine Mother and himself having an out loud conversation for the disciples to hear, not for their benefit, but just they were able to hear. And they sat for hours and listened to him talk to Divine Mother, this enlightened, realized master, just pouring his heart out to Divine Mother, all of his troubles, his worries, his joys, his struggles, just talking with her. And then she would answer in his voice. So they were just like, we're in the presence of Divine Mother here in Yogananda. And previous to that time, he had been touring and lecturing, touring and lecturing. So I think this experience went on for like a week. He was in Divine Samadhi, or 2 days, some lengthy period of time, not just a blip. And after that, he was like, I can't tour anymore. I have to write. There's things I need to leave behind in this world. I don't know when Divine Mother is going to take me, and I need to make sure these things are here. So he wrote his interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, and he wrote the Second Coming of Christ and a third book, which I can't remember. But those are like two of my most sacred scriptures, because they're written by a man who was Divine Mother while he was also himself. And the disciples were like, he was changed after that. They were inside of God. So talk about being pounded with grace. And then he died 4 years later. He has an astounding lineage, but he died 4 years later when he was, you know how he died?
I think I have it in my head, but I want you to say it out loud.
So it was the very first time an Indian prime minister had come to the U.S. Paramahansa Yogananda's Indian. And so he hosted him at his, I don't know if it was an ashram, but his location. The Indian prime minister was there. Yogananda was on stage, just very happy. And he had written a poem about the great marriage of the spiritual traditions of India and America, which he loved. The spiritual tradition of America, which he said was a can-do attitude. He was like, when I try and tell people in India that they can become enlightened, they're like, oh yeah, sure, but maybe 10 lifetimes from now. A lot it would come to America, and us having no tradition of the karma, lifetimes, that kind of stuff. He'd be like, you can be enlightened in this lifetime. And Americans would be like, let's do it. You know?
That's a nice spin on our can-do attitude.
But it has been true. There have been many of his American disciples who are now enlightened, you know? So anyway, this Indian prime minister came, Yogananda. They were on stage. Yogananda read a poem about the great union of the spiritual traditions of America and India, stood up and died. He had completed his work. He just hit the stage. And his disciples were like, are you sure he's dead? He's not just in another samadhi? And his body didn't rot for 6 months. And it was one of those saints' bodies, you know? It was perfect. It smelled good. Anyway. So yeah, to your point, death, it can be a time when the grace just comes through, coming in hot, you know?
Yeah, truly grace-filled. Truly grace-filled. Wow. Okay. Well, there's a part of the story that I'd like to hear more about, which is the Lakota connection.
Yeah.
Like, how did that start coming in? Like, what was the time period with that?
Yeah, this was after seminary. I was lost. I hadn't found where I was headed yet. And I was working with a therapist out of Naropa who had connections with folks in the Crow Dog tradition down in Cresto. And I was in therapy with him, and we just weren't really getting anywhere. And he had a student who was studying with some Native American church folks, just learning from them and being with them. And he's like, they've set up a ceremony down there, a teepee ceremony. That's an open invitation for folks who want to come and pray in that way. And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about, but sure, I'll come. I don't know what you mean, pray in that way. Teepee meeting, whatever. And I went down, and this interesting thing happened, which leads me to another spiritual tradition. Was there were, like, before you come and work with this kind of ceremony, and this particular medicine, it's peyote medicine, sacred to many people in North America primarily, but South America. We have some requirements for you so that you can be in good, fit spiritual condition before you come. And one of them was to not drink alcohol, because they said the spirit of alcohol doesn't get along with this spirit, because this spirit of this plant doesn't like how alcohol has messed up the indigenous folks. So don't bring that in here, because they'll fight and you won't have a good time. And I was just like, that makes no sense to me. I have no idea what you're talking about. Spirits fighting each other, and but whatever, And I'd never done anything in my life that required me to not drink alcohol, and I was a big drinker. And then I was sitting in that ceremony, which was rigorous and intense and astoundingly beautiful and eye-opening. And I had no idea that you could pray for 13 hours straight, like talk to a fire, pray in that way. And I had a really clear conversation with the spirits in that tradition that night where they said, there's a path for you here that's going to be really helpful for you, but you have to choose. You can't do the alcohol path and this path. I was like, still in that moment, it just didn't quite make sense to me. I was like, choose, what do you mean? And I don't understand why. What do you mean a path? But it just felt super clear. And 6 months later, I got sober. I've been sober 7.5 years and discovered there is a spirit behind alcohol, and it's not excellent. It's deceptive for folks who get seduced by that spirit. We'll put it that way. Not everyone does, but I sure got seduced. And I decided I want to figure out what this other path is, this ancient path with spirits who talk to me with the voice of a fire. I'm like, "Oh, how did you do that?" I was staring at the coals, and then a spirit was talking to me. And
It's like that was like a real tangible experience you were having.
yeah, I mean, it's literally like,
Was that
yeah,
the first time you'd ever had some sort of encounter of that sort?
yeah, I think so. I think the spirits have been talking for a long time because they talk to everyone. But I didn't know how to listen until I was in a listening container like that, where they're like, listen for the voice of the spirit, talk to the fire. I'm like, okay, I don't know what you mean, talk to the fire, but I'll just pretend, But like the spirits don't care if I think I'm pretending or not. They'll talk back. So that tradition it's an edgy one for me. And it's one that I continually have to humble myself before, because as many people, yourself and others, and probably your listeners know, um, the indigenous traditions have been just like gobbled up by a lot of hungry colonialists. And I have actually, in those traditions, found that they work better for me when I walk in with my Christianity. And I learned this from another man he's another white man in the indigenous traditions. And he's like, these traditions and these people and these relationships and these communities, um, have more of let me try and figure out how to put this in words. Well, he's like, I'm Nordic. I'm a Viking people, and I need to walk in with my Viking gods and make the introduction and make the proper diplomacy and say, this is who I am, and I'm here to like be in relationship with you. And so I found if I go in there and try to be a native person, which I see other people do and which I have tried before, be like, I'm native now, it doesn't work. But when I go in and I'm like, I'm a Christian minister here to be in prayer with Christ and to be in diplomacy with your spirits and your people and your ways, and for us to sit together in that way, it works a whole lot better. But that's been a huge growing process for me. First of all, to figure out what's my tradition and to learn that it doesn't even work if I want to just say, I'm going to pick up your tradition and practice your ways. It like made me sick, physically ill and spiritually ill. And I had to get well from that by sitting back into my tradition, Judaism and Christianity, and be like, I'm coming here with Christ as my, and a lot of the indigenous folks know Christ, and we actually know him a little better than you. We could tell you a little something about Christ. If you want to sit here in the dirt with us and be humble. And I'm like, you got it. You tell me. So it's been a good tradition for me in that way to encounter.
So I'm hearing you say that everyone in the world, wherever we're from, ethnically or culturally, or where the roots have been for a long time, regardless of diaspora or whatever, like each person kind of has like innate allies that we walk into situations with. And it just is better if you just are straight with like, these are the allies that I'm coming into this space with. Can we all be friends instead of like trying to disregard those allies and adopt new allies just for the sake of fitting in better? Like it's counterintuitive or something.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. Am I getting that right?
100%. Yeah. And I mean, I'm just kind of chuckling to myself because a lot of what I've worked on in the psychic program is helping people become aware of what allies exactly they're carrying. because they're not always good, you know?
Oh, okay, got it.
And
Totally.
you got to like be aware of who you're coming with.
Mhm.
To be, or I've had to be more aware of that and be self-responsible in that and be like, here are some of my naughty ancestors. Here are some of the people that are really helpful. Here are some of the spirits I work with. Here's how I met those spirits that I work with, you know. I got to be honest about where that came from too. So it's a whole world of allies out there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Right. But it's like be aware of who you're coming with. I almost kind of like borrowing terms from Aidan Wachter, who was on the show a few episodes ago. It's like this like subtle spiritual ecosystem that we're all interacting with. And so it's just kind of like having awareness going into that setting with the Lakota elders, like there's a subtle ecosystem of spirits here, and I just want to know who I'm bringing into this ecosystem. And just that just seems like good stewardship of like the subtle realm. Just
Yeah.
hearing you put it that way, does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing I've learned is with these super ancient traditions is they don't mess around, you know? I think there's a lot of modern spiritual traditions that have a lot of softness to them that are necessary. You know, people need good softness. There's a lot of like modern American yogic traditions that are like feels good, you know, oh, you know, let yourself be cuddled and held and that's so necessary. But I always keep an eye out for those like backbone of steel spiritual traditions because those are the ones that have the juice that I'm actually after. The ones that are like, if you mess around in here, you could die, you know?
Mm.
Not like of overheating in the sweat lodge, but like these spirits will take you out if you mess around. And fast, you know, and fast. And I mean, honestly, I told you this before, but that was one of the things that I was attracted to about the spiritual work that you do, because there's all kinds of spirituality on the social media and on Instagram, and a lot of it is soft and doesn't quite have a grounding or a background or a backbone or a tradition. And it feels good, and the memes are funny, and your memes are funny, but I was like, you're not messing around. I was like, you got some divine mother. You're talking divine mother, and I think you really mean it. And that was one of the things that I was like, I am going to reach out to you about your money zine, because I'm like, there's something here that well, I know like really is sustaining, like soul sustaining and life sustaining, and doesn't mess around and will help me clean my life out of things that will kill me. You know,
Yeah, I think the things, like just putting it in the terms of like things that don't mess around are the things that actually stand the test of time. And I think the other stuff that's a little bit softer doesn't actually stand the test of time, you know?
yeah,
And so I'm interested in spirituality that actually will endure to the moment that I die.
yeah.
Not just like things that only make sense when everything's going your way. Why would I want to do that?
Yeah.
That's like not how to live, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think you and I are both attracted to like what's gonna like stand the test of time. What's
Yeah.
gonna help me do this thing with my eyes open and my heart open and like really take it all in. Not just like give up as soon as it gets hard or
Yeah.
it's not going the way that you want it to.
I don't want the thing that makes me feel good. I want the thing that helps me heal, actually get well, you know, because then I'll just feel good from the inside.
Yeah. Oh my God, totally. Yeah, I mean, my spiritual teacher, my guru, has been such a role model because he's been sick I mean, speaking of healing, but he's been sick for as long as I've known him for 10 years. And he's actually been sick for like 40 years nonstop. But just like seeing somebody who is in a body that struggles so much, but who is just pounding you with grace anyway, was like a paradox that opened my mind to like all sorts of possibilities. It's like, oh, like there's more going on than just like waiting for everything to work out in my physical reality and in my body.
Yeah.
He just demonstrates that by breathing.
You're actually kind of bringing me back to for an earlier point in our conversation about like what people miss when we don't look at death. And I think one of the things I've seen is like the reason people won't look at death is an obsession with a healthy, able body and a really deep belief that that's the whole thing, a healthy, able body. And boy, you miss a lot, and you know, just the extreme disappointment and sense of profound failure that happens when the body fails, you know. And I've just like loved this job that I'm just completing at the nursing home is filled with disabled bodies, and the astounding spirits that inhabit them. And just like, I've written about this a few times, but again, I just truly feel like I've been at the feet of masters, of people with like life altering, life devastating strokes, Parkinson's, like, even folks who have like almost intentionally disabled their own bodies through like a lifetime of neglect and mistreatment, but are still incredible spirits. Has just been like, man, the body is like, oh, every tradition said this. It's just the vehicle. It's just the car. And it says nothing about the spirit. In fact, I've learned so much from like how, there will be 8 people with strokes and they're all different spirits living it differently. It could be the exact same type of stroke in the exact same part of the brain, exact same Parkinson's diagnosis, and they all do it differently. And it just speaks volumes about the possibilities of being a spirit in a body. And it's helped me like face my own fear of disability as an able-bodied person, and being like, well, shit, it's going to happen sometime in some way, shape, or form. But how do I want my spirit to be, my consciousness to be? So just to go back to that point before, if we look at death and how bodies are disabled through the dying process, then we can just really be like, what's possible for a spirit, you know, as the body dies and becomes disabled, up to death, up to the point of death.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I also think that there's such a, a, a missed opportunity for wakefulness when we avoid death perpetually, too. It's like just being like this floating consciousness, like not realizing like, this is a temporary embodiment and how beautiful everything actually can be. There's actually this Sufi master, what's Himayat? And I listened to some talk that he gave many years ago, and I remember he said something. He's like in his 80s, and definitely like an enlightened Sufi master living today. And he said something that really impacted me. And he was like, "The older I get, the less I want to leave. Like this world, this realm. It's like so beautiful." But the older he gets, obviously, the more difficult it is to be in the body. And yet he's saying, I don't want to leave because it's just so beautiful to be here. But there's that wakefulness maybe that comes when the end gets near,
Yeah.
And so that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
I actually remember the last time, or not this time, but maybe 2 times ago, my guru goes to India once a year roughly, except for COVID times. And maybe like 2 times ago, he was really sick when he was going to go to India, and he was like going to India. It doesn't matter if he's sick. He's like, I'll walk into the Ganges if I die there. Like, he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And I remember it was the night before he left, and I was at the ashram, and he, at the end of the meditation program, offers holy water from the puja, and you go up and take some of the water. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, what if this is the last time I ever see him? Just because he was like so sick, about to go travel in another country where everything is 10 times more difficult to do. And I just remember just feeling this intense, like, rapture-inducing presence to the moment, just knowing it could have been like the last time I ever saw him. But I think that's like, I'm just speaking to that wakefulness that we overlook when we like try to cognitively dissonance ourselves away from the fact that like everything's gonna fall away. The most important thing that you care about right now in your life, if it's not God, will fall away.
Yes.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's my little piece on that.
You're reminding me of a teacher I'm listening to right now, Ashanaya Swami, disciple of Yogananda, grand disciple. And she's currently teaching, just putting out like maybe 8 YouTube videos a day. I don't know how. I mean, every day there's like a new short, a new reel, a new YouTube, a new Instagram. I'm like, I got to listen to this on 2 times speed to keep up with you. But she's speaking to the insane challenges that are happening on this planet at this time. And she's like, Master, she refers to Yogananda as Master. Master just said that the sole purpose of difficult times is to reveal to people that the only answer is to seek God, that literally nothing else will work. And so, like, what a blessing and what a gift to be on the planet at this time when the only answer that remains is that answer, the true answer. And just this other, this other kind of grace giving. It's almost this kind thing that if there were any other path except for the most painful path, Divine Mother would take us on that path. But the only path that works is the most painful path. And just the kind blessing of our nature that we insist upon the pain path, and yet nevertheless Divine Mother gives it to us. And so I'm thinking of that. I think of that all the time. The great teaching of Christianity. People are obsessed with the crucifixion. It wasn't actually the big deal. I think, or I'll put it this way. I think we've got caught up on the suffering side of crucifixion and missed the point that that was actually very, very, very short. And there was a whole resurrection after it. But like that, you have to go through the pain spot. But as one of my mentors puts it, the worst thing is not the last thing. And that is the teaching of Christianity. The worst thing is not the last thing. And I'm just like clinging to that right now at this point on the planet. This is the only way. It reveals to me that the only path is God, and it's not going to be the last thing. And like, that's like trying to put out there right now, hang on this pain path. Keep your eyes on spirit. Just keep your eyes on spirit, because it's not the last thing. It just isn't, Well, it's going to be rough.
Speaking of keeping the eyes on spirit, something that I was wondering about earlier when you were speaking is, we were talking about Jesus. We were talking about Christ, and you said something like, most people could probably do with a little bit of Jesus. And I'm with you, but I'm just wondering, just for the listeners, like, what do you mean by that? And what is maybe different than maybe what the average person would think when you say that? Or somebody who grew up Christian maybe would think about that.
Yeah, actually I was just talking with my husband about this, because he told me this story where he was like at the gym and he had his headphones in, which is like the universal signal for don't talk to me. Mm-hmm. And someone came up to him and was trying to talk to him, and he was like, and the person insisted on talking to him anyway, and so he took his headphones out and was like, yes. And the man was like, I just want you to know that Jesus loves you and Jesus can be your Lord and Savior. And he's like, thank you, which is so funny because he's married to me and I sincerely believe things like that. But he's like, don't talk to me about Jesus being my Lord and Savior. But I just feel like when people hear you need Jesus, they hear right behind it the evangelical, are you ready to take Christ as your Lord and Savior? And to me, that is a hierarchy that Christ did not put into place of, I am Christ, your Lord and Savior, and I will save you because you are a victim or you need help or you're a sinner. And I really rely, there's a part in the scripture where Jesus is telling all his disciples how to do the healings, how to be a miraculous wonder worker, how to be an enlightened master. And he says to them, all of this you shall do and more. And it's just like, he's like, I'm just here at this point in history, but you're going to learn this way and you will do even more than I did. And there's another part, right, when he's giving him like the last lecture before he goes off to his destiny to be crucified. And he says, you call me a master. And it's right that you call me a master. He's not going to like be like, oh, I'm no master. He's like, oh, I'm a master. You call me a master. It's right. But I call you friend. And all of the great gurus I know and disciples are like we are friends, because friendship is the pure relationship. It's like the most pure relationship. There's no obligation friendship. And so Jesus is saying we are in an obligation-free relationship, a relationship based on freely choosing to be with each other. And all of this you shall do and more. So when I say like, y'all need some Jesus, I'm just like, you need within you the Christ consciousness that tells you that you are powerful beyond measure. You are an eternal soul here in service to other eternal souls, that even death under the crushing heel of the empire is not the end of you and actually has no power over you. Nothing has power over you. You are liberated beyond measure. You are free. And Christ taught us how to do all these things. It's still written in scripture. I just read through the Gospel of John with the nursing home residents, and I'm like, I can't believe the Roman Empire published this. This like insane instruction book for how to be a liberated soul. And the Roman Empire was like, yeah, sure, here we go. You know, and every empire since. And I'm like, to me, that is the insane Trojan horse of Christ and Christianity, is the instruction manual for liberation and self-realization is in the churches where people are being oppressed. So I'm just like, you can't keep a good man down, you know?
Is it obvious to you because you read things in a certain way, or do people just overlook it or don't interpret it in that way? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think to your point, it's all the consciousness you bring to it. I've had the incredible great fortune to study with people who are reading those scriptures from the consciousness of liberation and freedom. And they're like, if you read it from this lens, that's what it's all about. You can read those same scriptures and oppress the shit out of yourself and all your neighbors, the exact same scriptures, which people have done.
Yeah, well, it's like you can use a knife to kill someone, or you can use a knife to heal someone. Just depends on how you use it.
You know?
Wow. Yeah. So, but Jesus? You're saying like y'all need Jesus. Y'all need to realize that you are powerful beyond measure if you do XYZ view of reality or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, are there any like correlations to other traditions that would help somebody to see maybe like what you mean by Christ consciousness or Christ, or is there a difference between Christ and Jesus? Sorry, I just said a bunch of different stuff. But now I want you to answer that. Sorry, that just came out. What's the difference between Christ and Jesus?
Yeah.
Forget it. That's just I said.
I can't tell you how many church marquees this has been on. Christ ain't just a last name. It's a whole consciousness. So in the Greek, we say Jesus Christ as if it's like first name, last name. In the Greek, it was Jesus, the anointed one. Christ comes from the Greek word for anointing, like christening. So it just means this being is holy and sacred and has been anointed. Jesus, in my understanding, was the second to last incarnation of a being who had achieved Christ consciousness in that lifetime. The last incarnation of the soul known as Jesus, and I have this on good authority, he was Jesus, went through that whole lifetime and then wanted to come back one more time just to have a little fun as a Greek sailor. So that was actually the Christ conscious that soul's last lifetime. Which I'm like, that sounds so gay, and I'm sure it was. Those freaking Greek sailors, come on now. Anyway, Jesus was just the name of that incarnation, just the name given to that body in that incarnation. And Christ is the anointed consciousness that inhabited that body. And so Christ consciousness, as I've been taught, is the highest possible consciousness that physical matter can attain in this realm before it's popped up into the next realm, the messianic realm. And then I think above that is the Buddhaic realm, which is where Buddha consciousness comes from. So Christ consciousness is heart consciousness, Buddha consciousness is mind consciousness. And they're like layered realms, layered astral realms.
So kind of translating that into the language of my classical tantric view or Shakta view, it's like the guru is like the person, kind of. Like just using my guru as an example, there's like Steve.
Yeah.
But like the actual function of the guru and the purpose of the guru is the thing that works through the body. And so that thing is called grace. And grace and guru are kind of like synonyms. Like grace, guru, revealment, realization, these are all synonyms actually. But it sounds to me like you're saying like the incarnation was Jesus. But then the Christ consciousness is like this thing that was inhabiting his form that was ultimately the thing that was transforming people.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
100%.
Have you noticed kind of like a similar, like when you were studying Yogananda, kind of like similar principles at work with like the discipleship in that tradition and
Yeah.
the impact of him?
You know, some of his disciples are pretty certain that Yogananda is the reincarnation of Christ. And they asked him once, which it's like totally possible because Christ consciousness is not personal, but they're like, are you the same Christ consciousness soul that was also Jesus? And they were just kind of paying attention over many years. And I guess what he said in response was, well, what difference would it make? He just like wouldn't answer them. And they're like, is that you, Jesus? And he's like,
Yeah, like a certain flavor of that grace power
right?
coming back again.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately, it's like all the ocean, and then there's like one wave that
Yeah.
came back, but it's
Yeah.
made up of the same
Same.
ocean water. Mm-hmm.
Same. Yeah. Same consciousness that is just like, yeah, I'll take form again. You need a little nudge there, I'll come in and put a nudge there, a little nudge there. And that's all Christ was a nudge at the perfect point in time. I mean, it's had profound repercussions, obviously, but
Oh, for sure. Right. Yeah, because the guru means something in Sanskrit. It means that which dispels darkness and brings light.
Mm.
And so the guru can actually be all sorts of things because guru and grace are synonyms.
Mm-hmm.
And so from like my point of view, it's like if somebody goes through something really, really difficult, like a cancer diagnosis or a divorce, or they get into an accident or like something really crazy happens, it doesn't always need to be a catastrophic event, but it often is. And then somehow on the other side of that experience, you wake up to something because it was so bad, and like you come onto the spiritual path or you have an experience of God or something. That is the guru functioning in your life. It's not like the accident is the guru, but it's like grace is the power of your consciousness evolving.
Yeah.
And so it either shows up in the form of a person that you get to have a relationship with, which is the best case scenario, or grace is working no matter what for life. And so is there ever a view in your way of looking at things where it's like people are interacting with Christ consciousness like in their daily life? It's not just like having an experience with a person?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, based on my understanding of how lifetimes go, it's incredibly rare to be incarnated at the same time as your guru, your teacher, the embodiment of grace. And yet, nevertheless, I need many, many lifetimes to continue along my path. And so it's about like, just knowing that Christ consciousness is always available. To me, Christ consciousness is about the awareness of what's actually real and what's not, and having the capacity to perceive reality, which is just like the biggest, longest project in the whole universe, perceiving reality. I'm sure I'm like maybe 2% done in that project, but it's a good time.
We're buffering.
Yeah. But it's just that gift of what in the Christian tradition is called the inbreaking of spirit, of being able to perceive more and more often spirit breaking through the material realm, breaking into the material realm, which is exactly what Christ and Guru is, in breaking of spirit into a material body, being like, what am I looking at right now? What am I experiencing? What am I feeling? This is wild. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a question that I have. What are I am so allergic to conversion energy. I'm so alert, and I'm not saying you're doing this literally at all. I'm just speaking this out loud. Like I'm so allergic to conversion energy and messianicness and trying to get people to accept a religion. I'm so fucking allergic to it. I don't care what religion it is. Like don't fucking do that. But I just care about autonomy too much. But what do you think are people's like biggest objections to understanding Christ as you understand it? Not that they need to, but just like in your experience, like what have you seen people's biggest objections be?
Well,
Or the obstacles?
yeah. There's a huge cultural obstacle because the current society I live in, modern American society, has Christianity as a culture, not necessarily as a wisdom path. In fact, almost never as a wisdom path, but as a way to enforce cultural norms. So it's become the vehicle through which to enforce biases, gender norms, behavior, punishment. Oh my God, it's an enormous vehicle for punishment. The thing I always like to mention whenever I can about the Christian faith is that crucifixion and suffering and a suffering savior and martyrdom didn't come about until 1000 when oh, I don't know which empire it was at that time was conquering the northern now European indigenous people, and they were saying we're doing this in the name of Christ, and they're like, it kind of looks like your Christ, who was up until that point depicted as standing at the open gates of paradise with the four rivers of paradise flowing out between his feet, saying the gates of heaven, the kingdom of God is open to you now, right now. And they're like, that guy seems chill. And they were like, oh, yeah, no. And then about 1000, they started saying the more important Christ is the one who suffers eternally on the cross. But let me just tell you this historically, because most people have never seen a crucifixion, God forbid. But when someone is crucified, it takes them 7 to 10 days to die of suffocation. They hang up there until they suffocate. Christ died in 6 hours, and anyone reading the scriptures at the time would have known that the miracle wasn't that he suffered on the cross, but that he didn't suffer. He wasn't suffering. Yeah. And yet empire was like the most important thing about Christ is that he died and suffered for you. And so I think that's a major obstacle to overcome, because what a fucking guilt trip. When in fact, he was like, even the suffering that this empire is trying to impose upon me, I refuse it. I die of my own volition 7 days ahead of schedule and come back in a joyous light form, saying to my beloved disciple Mary, Mary, don't touch me yet. I've got to go up to the Father, so that's probably a major imposition, guilt and suffering.
You said earlier Christ was a witch.
Yeah, I do know.
Christ was a witch.
So
Jesus was a witch.
yeah, so when I'm like, this is the real estate thing people need is the one who's like, you cannot make me feel guilty, shame, or suffering. I'm out of here, I'm a delightful child of God. You cannot dim my light. Even if you put me on a cross, I'll hang out for a little bit, but then I'm going.
I'm gonna be chewing on that one. I'm gonna be chewing on that one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing that you were saying that. Oh, well, we need to start maybe phasing out of this conversation, but I'm just wondering, um, is there any part of your story that you didn't tell that you'd really like to share?
Here's one thing I'll just say. I briefly mentioned sobriety, and I don't talk about it a lot because that's one of the principles of my sobriety, of the 12-step program. But I have been really delighted and excited and curious to see a growing movement around folks getting conscious around their relationship to alcohol. And regardless of where people are, whether they drink less, like harm reduction drinking, don't drink at all, what I'm seeing is like a waking up of people saying, this is a substance that our culture puts forward to put us to sleep. And I don't want to be asleep anymore. And I just see that across the board. And it's been like a really powerful and beautiful part of my story. I don't think I could have had any of the spirituality I've had if I had still been asleep under the spell of alcohol and a variety of other things that were like intended to keep me asleep. And so, I always say, if there's folks out there just listening, curious about their relationship with alcohol, the thing I really want to validate is like people's desire to be awake during a time when it almost seems preferable to be unconscious. People are insisting upon being awake. And that's something that I've learned through my particular journey of taking away the things that put me asleep, is like, it is so interesting to be awake right now. It's so powerful.
Yeah, is you saying that is reminding me of like the point of view that my tradition has on Kali Yuga, like this epoch that we're in right now. And there's this kind of like old school saying that like if you can hold your tongue and hold your crotch, you'll be able to realize God as fast as possible through this epoch. And but I'm for some reason this is coming up just hearing you say all of that, where it's like if you can try to stay as awake to reality as possible, even though we're in these man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, like you can realize spirit or realize God faster than any other epoch.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing you say, like, people, obviously everyone who's listening has free will and you guys can do whatever you want, but kind of asking yourself, like, are the choices that I'm making around substances or whatever it is that I'm doing actually keeping me awake to reality, or is it kind of keeping me dull?
Yeah.
You know,
There's high potential for enlightenment right now.
high potential for enlightenment right now.
Mm-hmm.
The weather is calling for it.
Yeah, the conditions are perfect.
99% chance of enlightenment. That's so real, though. People don't want to hear it. Oh, well, what did you learn? Did you like learn anything about yourself telling your story today, or was there anything that came up that you were surprised by just before we start wrapping up?
This thing that's been growing recently, I mean, just in the past few weeks, is an increasing, how do I put it? I've just become more and more excited about getting excited about other people. Like there's a growing sense of like, how can I do whatever is within my power to encourage other people? Not even like encourage them to do anything different, but just be like, do you know how amazing you are? How much you are loved? What a delightful human being you are. And I just found in my private practice, in sharing my story just now, in the work I do with folks who are dying, in the nursing home, that like it is so much fun to support and encourage other people in a way that I just like hadn't really realized before. Yeah, it's been this growing open-hearted thing in my recent, very very recent past. Even my husband commented on it. He's like, you used to be a real hard ass. Like there was a car broke down in front of our house, and usually I'm like, oh, I can be so harsh. I'm like, that's their karma, don't mess with them, don't get involved, we don't want to tangle our karma with their karma, you know. And a car broke down in front of our house, and we were just watching on the porch in the dark, like waiting to see what they were going to do. And then finally, the two of us started talking at the same time. And I was like, no, you go. He goes, no, you go. And I was like, I was just about to say we should go see if they need help, if they need a jump. And he was like, I was just about to say we should go inside because it's their business. And I'm like, no, we have to help people. We got to give them a jump, you know? So there's something growing in faith and getting to share who I am in this beautiful way that it just makes me want to support other people in doing that. Who are you, beautiful soul? Come out.
Oh, I love that. That's really sweet. That's really sweet. Well, it's been really awesome to like learn about your story. There were so many things that I learned about you today. That was so cool.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Really cool work.
Of course. So, is there anything you're working on? Like, what do you want to shamelessly plug before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm teaching people how to sing right now. I'm not any kind of professional singer, but I really do believe that when one of my ministers and just amazing mentor, Nadia Bowles-Weber, says, when I sing, I'm never afraid. And there's a lot of reasons to be afraid right now. And I think none of the work that needs to be on this planet can happen if there's fear. And so I'm like, well, what can I do? And I'm going to teach people how to sing. So I'm teaching singing groups. It's going to be ongoing workshops around Denver. And everything that I ever do all shows up on my website, Clairvoyant Counseling. So you don't have to be any kind of expert. You can just sing, come and sing with us because you don't want to be afraid anymore. I'll teach you simple songs that you can teach to other people, and we can begin really singing together a lot more.
Oh, So cool. I love that you're doing that. That's awesome. When people go to your website, can they do like virtual sessions with you? Like what else
Yeah.
do you offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of the work I do is clairvoyant counseling sessions. That's why the website is named Clairvoyant Counseling. And I just sit and help people like see the truth about what's going on with them energetically, which I have found is very useful for the folks who are like, what's going on? I need to know so I can act on it and make the changes I need to. So, yeah, combining a lot of the pastoral care that I've done over the years with the clairvoyant skills, just look at like, hey, is your mom in your third chakra trying to tell you what job to apply for when really you just want to go work for the farm and pick flowers? Well, it looks like that will be better for your health. You'll get cancer if you do the other job. So, just saying, cancer is in your space with your mom. You make the decision. Maybe that's your path, but it looks like picking flowers will open up your heart chakra. So stuff like that. I'm not saying you personally. You look good and clear.
Okay, thank you. I trust you. Thank you. Yeah, so sessions, you in Denver doing in-person seeing stuff. Is there anything else or is that it?
Lots of classes online, both longer classes. I teach like longer 3-month, 6-month workshops on a variety of different things. Just taught one on how to be a healer, how to do the work that I do, help people see other people clearly so you can bring some really good healing to them. And then just shorter one-off workshops. I'm always noodling on like stuff about Mary, about Jesus, about Mary as like, I'm about to teach one on the Virgin Mary as like an advanced. Okay, when they say immaculate conception, it doesn't mean she was a pristine virgin. It means that she had like immaculate spiritual energy such that she could conceive of and then manifest a Christ being. Advanced spiritual work. So I'll be teaching like that kind of stuff if you're interested in that. Anyone else?
Ah, I'm interested.
I know.
I'm interested. Yeah, maybe I'll bring you back onto the show for season 2 and you can just talk about Mary.
Well, just let
Would you
yes.
love that? Would you love that? Okay. So it's been really grand. I think we need to do a bathroom break. But it's been really awesome hearing your story today, and thanks for being on the show.
What a delight. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. The information for Cindy is down in the description wherever you are listening to this podcast. And just so you know, this is almost the end of season 1. We have one more episode after this episode that's coming out in 2 weeks. And then season 1 is over. And I am going to pause and sit back and kind of ask myself, how do I want season 2 to look? And I think it's going to be a little bit more conversational, maybe more solo episodes with me talking, or maybe even getting people that I trust to interview me about what I know. It's been awesome to prop people up and help people share their work in the world. This first season, that was totally my intention. But I think next season, I'd like to have it be a little bit more about, real conversations with people where I'm not just like the silent interviewer. I'm like a little bit more involved. And so season 1 is almost over. And if you really want to support this show so that it can keep growing, don't forget to rate it. So you can rate it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. If you want to just plug it in your Instagram story and say, I really love this show. If you want to take your favorite Grace Pilled episode and send it to a friend or a colleague or a lover, that is the easiest way and the best way to support me so that I can keep this party going. And then other than that, I am teaching a secret business course. Actually, it's a secret. If you want to find out all the details about it, if you go on my website, I have a secret business email list, and you can drop your email there and get all the details for that. And other than that, I just work with people one-on-one. I have my Patreon, and I hope to see you somewhere, somehow in this digital space. And I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful rest of your day.